Hello. Now I'm going to tell you a story from real life. It's not a fairy tale or motivational nonsense from social media. It's about a dream that broke one person and lifted another. It's a story about how life can take two people in opposite directions, even if they started from the same broken sidewalk in Brooklyn. My name is Jake Parker. I grew up in a neighborhood where police sirens were lullabies and finding $10 for lunch was a victory. My father left when I was 6. My mother worked in a laundry, her hands always smelling of bleach. But we had the most important thing, a dream to escape this shit. And then there was Mason Carter. My best friend. We lived next door to each other. We skipped school together, stole apples from the farmer's market, and shared a bag of chips like it was a steak from Ruth's Chris. He was calmer, always a bit of a dreamer. Mason dreamed of becoming an artist. His notebooks were filled with sketches of people, streets, dogs we saw on the subway. He saw beauty where I saw only fatigue and debt. Our school? Just a place where you studied not to pass tests, but to avoid joining a gang. Mason and I were inseparable. When I worked after school, moonlighting at a diner, he would wait for me so we could listen to Jay-Z on an old player together. We even had a plan together, to go to college, get a scholarship, change our lives. But life isn't a plan. In high school, I started preparing seriously for the SAT. I understood that either I would get into a decent college or I would end up mopping floors at McDonald's. Mason became more and more withdrawn in his drawings. His father was an alcoholic, his mother was unemployed. He began to disappear from home more often. Once, he didn't show up for a math test. He just didn't show up. And then he disappeared for a week. I enrolled in college in New Jersey. On a full scholarship. It was my chance. I studied, worked, hardly slept, but I knew it was my ticket out. We were still in touch with Mason. He wrote something about his girlfriend, about a new series of graffiti in the subway. But there was something empty in his words. As if he was just going with the flow. The last time I saw him in his youth, we were sitting on the roof of an old house, drinking cheap beer and talking about the future. I told him, "You and I, brother, will conquer this world." He just looked at me and replied, "I'm not sure this world wants me to conquer it." I didn't think much of it at the time. But now, looking back, it was the first crack. The light hadn't gone out yet, but it had already begun to flicker. College was like another world. No one spoke street slang, no one wore worn-out sneakers with holes in them, and no one understood what it meant to count pennies on the subway. That didn't scare me. On the contrary, I felt excited. I studied finance, business, and marketing. I could spend nights in the library, while also working as a pizza delivery guy and moonlighting in the student office. I wasn't interested in parties. I knew what I wanted: stability, confidence, and most importantly, to prove to myself that I could avoid repeating my father's fate. Mason, meanwhile, stayed in Brooklyn. We wrote to each other less and less. His messages became shorter. He worked in construction, then at a car wash. He said he was preparing a series of paintings. But I knew he was just trying not to drown. After graduation, I got an internship at a large investment firm in Manhattan. Where everyone wore custom suits, where lunch cost as much as my stepfather's monthly salary, and where everyone smiled not at you, but at your potential capital. At first, I felt like an outsider. I didn't know how to behave at the negotiating table. I didn't understand why everyone drank iced coffee and talked about golf. But I learned. I observed. I repeated. I adapted. And in the end, I became one of them. But not because I changed, because I played better than them. 2 years later, I had my first six-figure salary. I bought a Tom Ford suit and rented an apartment on the Upper East Side. For the first time in my life, I walked into a restaurant and didn't look at the right column with the prices. I felt like a winner. And also guilty. Because from time to time, when I was riding home in an Uber, I saw the shadows of people on the sidewalks. Someone was sitting with a sign that said, "Please help." Sometimes I caught myself thinking, what if Mason is among them someday? I tried to find him on social media. But his accounts were dead. I asked my friends, no one had heard from him. It was as if he had been wiped off the map. But I couldn't afford to be weak. The stock market doesn't wait for you to deal with your past. I pushed forward. Once, I was on stage at a youth business forum, and I was asked, "Jake, what was your main motivator?" I answered without thinking. Poverty. It taught me not to look back. The audience erupted in applause. But something tugged at my heart. Because I knew there were those who couldn't escape like I did. And I was one of the few who were lucky. But fate is a strange thing. It never forgets. And if you think you've paid for your past, it will throw you a reminder. That's exactly what happened to me. And that's the beginning of the next episode. I hadn't heard from Mason in over 5 years. The world I now lived in didn't intersect with his. Business clubs, meetings with investors, vacations in the Hamptons, all of that was a million miles away from his reality. But sometimes, in the silence of my expensive loft, when there was no music playing and no phone calls, I thought I could still hear his voice. It happened in the fall. My college friend Jared sent me a news story, another report on the homelessness crisis in New York City. "Dude, I think your childhood friend is in the video." I opened the video and almost dropped my phone. It was Mason. With long hair, a worn jacket, and empty eyes. He was sitting near Penn Station with a cardboard sign, "Artist. Broke. Need help." Something broke in my heart. I could have closed the tab. Told myself, this is no longer your problem. But something stronger compelled me to leave the office, call a car, and go to the station. I searched for him for 3 days. And finally, I found him. He was sitting in the same place, in front of him a plastic cup with pennies, next to him a crumpled backpack and an old notebook. "Mason?" He looked up. He recognized me. But he didn't smile. "You're Jake." Well. There was a minute of silence. I sat down next to him. People were staring. It's not often they see a man in an Armani suit next to a homeless person. "What happened, man?" I asked. He shrugged. "First my mother died. Then I got fired from the car wash. I started drinking. Then I painted less. Then I stopped altogether. And then I just disappeared. From myself." I offered him help. A hotel. A shower. Food. Even a job. We had a vacancy for a creative designer in our office. He refused. "This is your world, Jake. I'm just a shadow in it. You can still change everything," I said. "Do you think everyone gets a second chance? That's a fairy tale for those who still have some foundation left." It hit me. Because I knew he was right. I had support, a scholarship, random luck. He had nothing. He just fell out of the system. Mason was still the same, deep, quiet, honest. But now there was a broken dignity in his voice. Like someone who had stopped fighting, not because he had given up, but because no one was listening anymore. I left him some cash, my business card, and something even more important, silence. No advice, no moralizing, no, everything will be fine. Just a silent presence. As I walked away, I looked back. He was looking at me. And in his eyes was a mixture of pain and pride. "Those who choose a different path do not turn back," he shouted after me. "But I haven't forgotten where we come from," I replied. After that meeting, I was no longer the same person. My office looked the same, glass walls, an expensive coffee machine, a membership to the rooftop gym. But something inside me had cracked. I began to notice details that I had previously ignored. The security guard who slept on a chair at night. The cleaning lady who hid from us that she wore shoes that didn't fit. The courier who handed me coffee without taking his backpack off his shoulders, because he never had time to sit down. It was a different America. An America where there were no stock portfolios or vacations in Bora Bora. An America we didn't see, but which carried us on its shoulders. Mason was part of that America. And I was part of the one that laughed at it, not realizing that I could have been there myself once. I began to be annoyed by the conversations in the office. How my colleague complained that his Tesla was delayed in delivery. How my boss complained about his personal trainer. I remembered Mason, how he drew on the back of checks, how he created a world out of nothing that never recognized him. I wanted to help. But help isn't just money. And it's definitely not pity. I organized a project, a fund to support street artists who had lost their homes but not their talent. I found a few curators. I attracted investors. We started buying old paintings, printing them on merchandise, giving the artists a new opportunity. It wasn't much. But it was a start. I went back to Penn Station. Mason wasn't there. I waited 3 days. On the 4th day, he showed up. He looked worse. He had lost weight. His eyes were tired. "Are you back?" he asked. "I never left," I replied. I told him about the fund. I offered him a chance to participate. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Do you really think a few t-shirts with prints will change this damn world?" "No," I replied. "But they can change someone. For example, you." Mason looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Okay. But only if I decide what and when to paint. As it should be, brother." He agreed. 2 weeks later, we organized the first exhibition. His works were raw, painful, honest. They didn't embellish, they struck at the heart. People cried. One investor bought his painting for $18,000. Mason couldn't believe it. "I just painted what I saw every day." "That's the point," I said. "You saw what others are afraid to look at." A year passed. Mason no longer lived on the streets. His exhibitions attracted long lines, his paintings sold for tens of thousands of dollars, and magazines called him the voice of the unheard. But he still didn't trust this world. He slept on the floor. He ate simply. He was afraid that all this would disappear as quickly as it had appeared. One evening, we were sitting on the roof again. He was wearing an old sweater, and I was wearing an Italian wool jacket. And yet it was the same night as in our youth. Mason was silent. Then he asked, "What if I lose everything again tomorrow?" "This time you're not alone," I said. "Jake." He looked me straight in the eye. "Did you really believe in me, or did you just want to relieve yourself of guilt?" I was taken aback. I remained silent. "Because sometimes," he added, "kindness is a form of self-medication." I didn't know what to say. And that's probably why he smiled. "But you know what? I don't care. Because even if you did it for yourself, it saved me." Mason went to Seattle for his exhibition. We agreed to meet in a week. But a week passed. Then another. No calls. No answers. I found out later, he had disappeared. He just didn't show up for the opening. His things were left in the room. The police found no evidence of foul play. His notebook, with his last drawing, was left open on the table. There was a picture in it. It showed 2 boys on a roof. One was looking up. The other was looking down. We are from different worlds. But from the same sky. I still don't know where Mason is. Maybe he's back on the streets. Or maybe somewhere in the mountains, where no one disturbs him while he draws. But every time I pass by an artist in the subway, I stop. I look. I buy something. And I say, don't give up. Someone will see you. Definitely. Because once I didn't see. And I don't want to lose again.